Hi friends, are you ready for our weekly Lenormand reading? Today is Sunday. Well, I love you too, Roxy. Today is Sunday, April 12th. The very first card out is what Spirit would like to speak with us about. First card out is the book. The book is knowledge. It can be a little bit quieter. It can be, information is coming forward. We've got the snake in the center. That can be a little challenging, but not insurmountable because the mountain is to the right. We also have the fox in the tower. The fox in the tower would be like a professional that would be more elevated, especially when you look at the mountain in that mix too. And then we've got the flowers. The flowers are recovery. They are springtime energy. They are creative. And they provide a lot of color, right? So, with the clouds being in the upper left-hand corner of this, I just feel like that would be the weather, that could be your thoughts, but it's more psychological, okay? Now, the clouds in the book and the mountain, that would be higher thoughts, higher learning, higher education. So this could be speaking of maybe taking a course, possibly online. It could be obtaining more wisdom from a professional. It could be a number of things. And the mice are there. The mice have that feeling of possible loss. It could be little niggles. It could be fears, worries, concerns. So, those are those energies that are kind of playing a role here. So it could be that you're getting ready to take a test and you might be a little nervous. It could be that you need to consult somebody to solve a problem. So much going on in this first portrait that I probably could do a whole reading on. All right, the next card out is the cross. The cross, that's your karmic. Can be a lesson. It could be responsibilities. It could be spirituality. But, once again, sometimes we go through things and we learn a very important lesson. So there is no mistake there. If you learn from the mistake, then it becomes a learning experience, right? It's when things keep happening, the universe tends to keep putting the same lesson in front of you until you learn it. So that's why you see patterns, of behaviors. You see, challenges that will keep resurfacing. So you need to get to the bottom of it before the lesson will, you need to learn it before the lesson will, go away, basically, or it'll keep reappearing. Now, the child is in the center. The child is something new. So, children need to learn things, right? Sometimes the hard way, but I always like to teach children in a fun way. If you can kind of get your point across in a more, how you would treat a child, in a learning environment. It's not always fun and games, but you still need to go out on recess, right? So if you can, incorporate maybe a field trip into a learning experience, maybe make that part of the lesson plan, okay? We've got the garden, the cross, and the tree. That would be like out in nature. That could be going to like, what kind of speaks here would be like, like Dow Gardens or Kensington Park or that sort of thing. Being out in nature, I feel like is where you can be closer to source, right? We've got the stork and the child. That kind of is the combination of a birth, not necessarily of a child, but certainly could be a child, but a birthing of a new idea, a new, the heart's next to that. So I mean a new passionate, something that brings you joy, right? And then we've got the birds, the moon, and the lady, which is, it's softer energy, but it's communication. So, if you can use your lower voice, when you scream and you get mad, people don't even listen, so if you can use your inside voice basically and, get your point across, that would be more effective. Okay. I see things that are kind of like seeing things from a higher perspective, so that kind of tells me that maybe you need to take a little bit of a pause before you, tackle the situation, and maybe think on it a little bit. But I do see communication is part of that. Also singing, listening to music, those are the energies that kind of can speak to us, right? So, I know children learn a lot through, song, right? Song and dance, really. Now, the next portrait out has the key in the upper left-hand corner. That's your solutions. And then the sun, which is positivity. It's healing energy. And then we've got the letter, which is communication, but it's mostly written, right? Then we've got the lilies, the dog, and the gentleman. That would be like a friendship. It would be like a long-standing type of a relationship. And then we've got the scythe, the birds, and the fish. That would be maybe possibly drawing the line or setting some, I feel like it could be little boundary-ish, but, you almost need to cut things off or tie things off, kind of a feel. So, don't leave any loose ends, all right? So I don't know if, because the lilies is also a work card as well. It can be a career. So maybe there is something that's going on at work that you need to tie up some loose ends with probably some potential clients, because the fish are there because that's another work kind of a card or money kind of a feel to it. But the fish also has opportunity and day-to-day lifestyles. So, don't bring things home with you. Tie things up while you're at work so that you can go home and relax, okay? This might be speaking of too, when we get home from work, we want to, sometimes we're too tired to handle some of the responsibilities. And, children sometimes, feel a little bit sad or neglected, or we work a little too hard. And, even if you do make the time, try to make a little more. Okay. All right. Let's see. The upper left-hand corner are those clouds. Okay. Those are your thoughts. Once again, it could be the weather. And then we've got the far right is the coffin. The coffin is transitional, okay? It's an ending. It is, it can be very temporal. Both the clouds and the coffin are kind of, they're not fixed energies. They have movement and transitory natures about them. The coffin represents transformation in the spiritual meaning of this, okay? And then the bottom left is the fox and the bottom right is the bear. And every time I see the fox and the bear together, I can't help but think of Bear Fox and Bear. Those little characters, they were, they tried to outsmart Bear Rabbit. And Bear Rabbit always came out unscathed, So I always say, I don't know if you're familiar with Bear Fox and Bear, but Bear kind of came across as being a little, aloof or, not real bright. But I always say, are you a dimwit, a nitwit, or a rabbit? All right. Let's see what we have here. Those were my favorite stories growing up, because my mom, when she would read stories, she would give each character its own voice, so they really came to life when she did that. And actually, she had a little business of her own, too. It was called Star, S-T-A-R, and it was Stories They'll Always Remember. And, I'm sure that there are children in the Linden community that remember her to this day. She would go around to all the schools and read stories. See, I'm just positioning them out for my, all right, let's see. Now our center card, the center focus is the dog. The dog, that's your loyalty, that's your friendships. It's next to the child, so that kind of gives a childhood friendship vibe to it. But I almost feel like, because the snake is to the left of that, It speaks of, like who you surround yourself with, the loyal, the friendly, the kind, good-natured, and then we've got the whip and the mice here. So that could be, a little bit more challenging energies to them. So it kind of tells me, just be careful, be mindful who you surround yourself with. If it's something that doesn't feel right, then you need to remove yourself, okay? All right, let's see. And you know what else I like to look for? If there are any duplicates, like right by each other. I don't see any right now, but boy, lately they've been coming out that way. And that's kind of like a exclamation point to me. It just means more emphasis should be put on those energies. Now I see the flowers and the scythe. That's, reaping, little bit of pruning feel to it. But we've got the scythe and the snake that has like a little snake bite feel. So, just be mindful. And, if there is a situation, sometimes you just need to back away slowly. But it also speaks of, sometimes, people say things and it doesn't come across how it was intended. Also, just be mindful of the folks that, they'll say one thing and it kind of tends to be something that either is to cut you down or belittle you in some fashion, or, maybe a hidden, like sarcasm, kind of has that vibe to it. Humor is the best medicine, but when it's being made fun of, that's not kind, right? So just remove yourself from those types of conversations or people, or, it's only the advice I have for that. But, people are people, but, or sometimes, you'll say something and then afterwards you'll realize, oh, that wasn't very kind and I didn't really mean it that way. And, apology would be in order, kind of a feel. I see clouds and the birds. Those are, once again, your thoughts coming out vocally, but it's really the energy of music is in the air, right? So, like right now I'm listening to my garden's wind chimes, and, it has a very soothing sound to it to me, but it might be annoying to my neighbors, sorry. Oh, wait, you know what? I just now noticed that there is a duplicate child here. So the child is, that playful energy, that getting outdoors and enjoying your youth and, playing games. And, I don't know, it just has that fresh, new energy to it. Spring is in the air. Things are, feeling like they're coming out of hibernation. But get out there and explore, take the opportunity to, see the new things popping up out of the ground. I like to go around, looking at when I take Roxy for a walk, all the flowers that are starting to pop out, the first signs of spring. We have the lady and the gentleman next to one another here. And then we've got the flowers in the coffin. Those are transformational, but they're recovery. So I don't know if there's any relationships that possibly have been on the brink there, or health possibly, because the tree is there. I do see that we're going through some changes and transformations, and, prayers might be in order, but I see recovery here. And then I see a little bit of a cross to bear. So, we might not be over all of our issues, but we're getting somewhere feel to it. So, things don't, heal in a day. You have to give it time. That's with everything, even, if you're on some health regimen, you're not going to necessarily see results in the first day, but over a long period of time, you're going to see, results. Okay. What else do I see? I know it has a churchy vibe to me. My church is nature. I like to get out there. But yeah, I do see some. Oh, here comes Jeffrey. So I'm going to pause it. I'm back. That was funny because the cards kind of indicated that there was going to be a little bit of an interruption. So, the scythe and that, those flowers and the crossroads and the snake, that kind of has that, little bit of an upset of an apple cart feel to it. So I just have to chuckle. I know that these cards are psychological in nature, but there is an element of divination here. So, I always say, we already know everything. We're just here to remember it. So each card kind of has that little trigger, which is also indicated with, the snake and the birch rod and the scythe kind of has that weapony feel to it. And it's a trigger. Things will trigger your situation. People can trigger you, but also something will happen. It'll trigger a memory. So that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting off of those. And then we've got, the tower there. That's like the official government feel. And then we've got the coffin, which is, something came to a closure. And then we've got the bear, which is coming out of hibernation or secret feel. So there might be something that's coming to a head that we might be experiencing too, okay? Just be mindful of that. Let's see what else. I see the clover and the heart are together, so that's kind of a blessing on the love or the, I feel it's joy, but there's the whip and the flower, that's creative energy, so it could be a number of things there, but, creativity is a great form of expression too, okay? Christ consciousness is next to one another with the cross, the sun, and then the child. How children, I always say that they're pure source energy of love and light. So, surround yourself with the littles, they bring you so much joy. And pets, the dog is next to the child here. And sometimes Roxy is both for me. She's been so sweet. I've taken a couple pictures of her this morning. I'll share with you. So, well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this week's reading. And if you would like a more personal reading, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to work with you one-on-one. Until next week, you have a very blessed week and take very good care of yourself.